They're by and large quite negative about the issue of U.S. bases, but also understand why they're valuable to what the United States does, and I don't think have a realistic expectation that the United States is likely to abandon those bases.
How does China view America's military bases in its area?
By and large, China views U.S. military bases in Asia with great contempt and insecurity as the kind of objective result of those positions, that forward deployment of U.S. forces, particularly along what is often called the first island chain, stretching down from the northern islands of Japan through to Taiwan, the Philippines, and around the Indonesian archipelago, that effectively enclose China in what they've described as encirclement by United States and its allies and partners. In general, Chinese strategists tend to think of the U.S. military bases, or tend to speak about U.S. military bases in contradictory ways, actually. And I'll lay out sort of two main lines of discussion that we've picked up on over the years in trying to understand how China thinks about military bases and perhaps some of its own. And the first of these sort of contradictory or maybe dialectically related views on U.S. basing is that they actually quite admire, from a military, operational, and even strategic standpoint, the great utility that the United States has gained from using bases in order to project military power, and in particular to conduct its logistics in order to operate intensely in multiple theaters all around the world. They look at places like Diego Garcia in the Central Indian Ocean, or Yokosuka in Japan, or Guam in the middle of the Pacific or Western Pacific, and really, no other way to describe it, admire or even seek to emulate in thinking about what would enable the PLA to project power that is equivalent to or capable of countering American power. Then on the other hand, as I said, there's a great deal of scorn for these bases, a kind of normative feeling that this is an element of American hegemony. This is a vestige of the Cold War in particular, and of China being the victim, effectively, of some power political move on the United States' part, in which all these other states are colluding. And it bears noting, we're here talking especially about Japan, for which China has special animus, but also about U.S. allies in the Philippines, a Chinese perception of a de facto U.S. ally on Taiwan, and in South Korea as well, in China's immediate neighborhood. They're by and large quite negative about the issue of U.S. bases, but also understand why they're valuable to what the United States does, and I don't think have a realistic expectation that the United States is likely to abandon those bases.
Where does China have military bases, and how would you say the US views China's bases?
So the short answer to the question is China has one overseas base. It's in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa at the entrance to the Red Sea. And that is the only formal, declared, official PLA military facility that exists outside of the mainland of the PRC. There is, however, a range of commercial infrastructure and other facilities that have been used with increasing intensity by Chinese military forces operating abroad, because, as I said, they are an increasingly global force and have an increasingly global mission set, but they don't have more than this one sole base in Djibouti as a formal hub for those activities. We've just seen in December 2023 the first observed PLA Navy visits to a base in Cambodia at Ream that Chinese firms built, notionally for the Cambodian military, but for which there may or may not be more agreement among the Chinese and Cambodians about what's the nature of their use. And there are a handful of places at various stages, perhaps, of yielding a Cambodia-like arrangement. Places like Pakistan and Equatorial Guinea and the United Arab Emirates, et cetera, are some of the ones that are routinely listed when the U.S. Department of Defense tries to understand where the PLA's interest is in basing. So there's really no contest whatsoever in terms of the ability to project power overseas. The United States, by head and shoulders and a couple body lengths, has a major advantage in that sense. We can see that since 2017, when the base in Djibouti was open, we have now maybe an undeclared temporary or ad hoc basing facility at Cambodia that has materialized in the course of 6-7 years. There are not a lot of places that are going to want to effectively put that target on their back as part of the competition, the long-term strategic competition with the United States and its allies. And so I think it's important to really specify again, what are the questions for which, or what are the problems for which China foresees overseas bases as being a potential solution? And at least for now, there is not a realistic case to be made that what they're doing is building up a high-end power projection capability in Europe or in the Middle East or in the Western Hemisphere, nor are they on a trajectory to do that based on the way that they're developing forces.